It is 4:04. I'm going to call the meeting to order. We have a quorum. Welcome to the June 7th, 2021 Rules Committee. We have a quorum present, and our first item on the agenda is public comment. And I understand we have one person for public comment.
In person. We have 4 people signed up for public comment. Looks like we have one in person. Are you Ms. Brewster? No.
Can you step up?
Can you step up and state your name, please? Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is L.J. Lowell. I signed up online for public comment. Would you like me to wait my...
No, you can.
Go right ahead.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Are we doing the 3 minutes or the 2 minutes?
I'm sorry. Could you speak a little bit more closely
Sure.
into the mic? You don't need a mask.
Oh, well,
Well-
I'm not fully vaccinated yet.
Oh,
so-
then please use a mask.
Yeah. Another week, and then we'll be done. So is this, we're on the 3-minute clock? Are we on the 3-minute clock?
Are we doing 3 minutes?
Yes, let's do 3 minutes.
3
yeah.
minutes. Okay, great. Thank you. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I apologize if I sound like I'm yelling. It's hard behind the mask. So again,
May I just ask you, are you here for Human Services or are you here for the Rules Committee?
Rules Committee?
Okay, go right ahead.
So again, my name is L.J. Lowell. Good afternoon, and I appreciate everyone's time today. I'm here to talk about the Ordinance 20-0-21 to eliminate the Board of Ethics in its current form. That was in the amended agenda for today. So pertaining to the Deputy City Manager's memorandum, I have these comments. As a taxpayer, I would like to see a comparative financial analysis of the projected costs for the proposed use of the special counsel and the administrative law judge instead of a community-based board. This was not addressed in the memo particularly, and I think it's important that all the taxpayers understand where the money's coming from, how the budget's going to be impacted, if the roles are going to be unpaid, if the city has to pay a retainer, if there's any hourly costs associated with, billable hours or staff reporting to these roles. For transparency purposes and understanding, I believe that the memo should have addressed that, or hopefully you'll discuss that at least so people understand what we're paying for. The other comment I have is that the memo states that the ordinance is intended to be temporary, which kind of took me by surprise a bit when I read it. And as such, the city should indicate a specific date or time frame for consideration within which a new Board of Ethics that does include community members shall be formed. That way it's already addressed as to how long it's going to take, what the project timeline is, and how you can do process improvement and process transformation. And lastly, on a personal note, I urge the city to retain the citizen-based ethics board. Having citizens on the board makes it accessible to everybody in the city, regardless of economic background or education. And I think it's important that residents have an opportunity to discuss how they feel about how a person or how a council person or a person covered under the ethics policy has conducted themselves in a, I'm going to say, or less judicial or formal court, if you will. I think some people might find that intimidating and choose not to file a complaint because they either don't understand the system or they're intimidated. So that's really all I had to say, and thank you, and welcome to all the new council members and to the new mayor, and thank you again for your time.
Thank you. So our next public speaker will be
Looks like we have Gretchen Brewster.
Gretchen Brewster.
She's here for Human Services, though.
Oh, sorry.
So apologize. Mike Vasilko.
Mike Vasilko. Mr. Vasilko, would you like to go ahead?
Hi, yes, thank you. It's not an agenda item, but I've asked offline through email to other council members and maybe even to the council in general, to the mayor, et cetera, that the Rules Committee take up the issue of ward rules of some kind, council member ward rules. I know you don't have any at the moment, is my understanding. Every alderman or council member, I should say, can do whatever they want to do with their wards, but there should be some consistency across wards. There should be consistent ward meetings, either monthly or every other month or something like that should be scheduled where it's required. There should be the newsletters should come out on a regular basis. Ward meetings and actually all committee meetings should be recorded. This came up, this has come up many times before, especially before the election. You know, the mayor doesn't have any oversight, I guess what I'd call oversight authority, I guess, over the aldermen. But regardless, the aldermen and the council members should be consistent with how they meet with their constituents. Otherwise, people have to go to other ward meetings to learn what's going on in the city. On another issue, I think the chat function should be enabled for all city meetings, not disabled like it currently is. You know, prior to the election, a lot of people were talking about improving communication with their constituents, finding a way where citizen comments, like the previous speaker, she had a lot of comments and questions where those questions could be addressed and would be addressed in a short time frame. Whether there should be a clearinghouse on the city website for questions, so that all the questions get answered in a timely fashion. Specifically, what I'm asking for is that the issue of ward rules for council members be established. Thank you.
Thank you. Darlene Cannon.
Next, we have Darlene Cannon.
Okay, thank you. Darlene Cannon, Second Ward. I am speaking tonight in support of R3, which is eliminating the city manager's ability to be able to place special orders of business on the agenda. I am also in support of R4, of a budget subcommittee, and I'm hoping that citizens like Jamie Collier will be included on that committee. I support R5 and R6. And I also agree with what the previous speaker said, LJ, in regards to C2, asking that we keep the current form of ethics and continue to have the board members be residents, and that it is available and accessible to all residents when they have concerns with elected officials, so that they have this avenue in which they can voice their concerns. So thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Next, we have,
That is all.
all right, that completes our public comment at this time. So now we're going to proceed with our agenda. The first item for consideration is, I'll just read it in, C1, 81st City Council Membership Chairmanship Schedule for 2021 through 2025. Staff recommends the Rules Committee approve the chairmanship schedule from June 2021 through May 2025.
Chairman Nguyen, may I ask that this item, I think starting with the rules changes that Mayor Besson has presented might make sense, because it seems that some of those rules changes would conflict even with this. So I wonder if we want to deal with that first.
No, I would like, Councilmember Reed, I was unaware that you were with us. No, I do want to proceed with C1. This is something that we've all discussed already. It's for action on our agenda. I think that we should take this up immediately. So is there a motion?
I move approval.
Second.
All right, thank you. Is there discussion? Alderman Fleming.
Yeah, I don't know. I think there might be an error with the Human Services Committee. So it has myself and then Alderman Braithwaite and then back to myself and then
I saw that.
and then Councilmember Burns. And I just think it's an error because I shouldn't go, I shouldn't go so many times before new people are rotated in.
Is there a question of perhaps are you,
Chairing another meeting at that same.
that someone else might be chairing another standing committee?
I don't know. I didn't double check everyone's schedule. I just know that I didn't think it should go myself and then Braithwaite then myself before it got to Burns and Reed.
Okay.
So,
Would you like to switch that, make a change?
I mean, it doesn't make me a difference. I just think, I'm assuming there's an error. Gar,
I think you're right. I think you're right. It is. You should only be on, everybody should only be on there twice.
Yes, and I'm
So
on
I
there.
have to review that.
Okay.
And fix that. I'm sorry.
Okay.
That's okay.
Can that be done immediately?
Probably not.
Okay, probably not. Okay. All right.
I mean, if you wanted, if we can, well, we can do it, I guess, at the next meeting. We have Human Services, obviously, after this, so I don't know if our committee is able to just make that change once it's adjusted in our
That
committee?
makes sense.
Or do we have to do it at the Rules Committee?
That's a good question.
Currently, according to, sorry, Chairman, currently according to our rules, we have to do it at Rules Committee.
right,
And that's
so
why,
if we
the
can just-
proposal that,
If we can just do it then before my chairmanship finishes in November, so I think that should give us time to get it done
We can bring
before
it
I'm
back
finished.
What,
and make an
Dara,
amendment.
could we, Councilman Reed, please hold off. Could you take a few minutes now and make the change?
It's just not that,
Okay,
believe it or not, it's not that simple. This schedule is very.
I know.
It's a very tedious job.
Okay.
So if it's okay, if you all want to approve everything else, and then I'll just.
Make that amendment.
Right,
That
Yeah.
makes
make
sense.
that change.
okay, all right. So would someone like to make that, move approval without that?
So I'd like to move for approval item number C1 with the amendment that will come back and change the May 2022 to September 2022 date.
Second.
All right, okay. So with that, Dara, could you call the roll, please? Ms. Franchalno, would you call the roll?
Dara's fine. Councilmember Kelly.
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite.
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen.
Aye.
Councilmember Nusma.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Sufferton.
Aye.
Councilmember Ravel.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
aye.
Councilmember Fleming.
Aye.
Mayor Biss.
Aye.
All right.
All right, thank you all. So we'll be, at the next Rules Committee, we'll deal with that. All right, so the next item is C2, which I will read in, and then I'm going to call on Councilmember Kelly. C2 is Ordinance 20021, amending Title I, Chapter 10 of the Evanston City Code, City of Evanston Code of Ethics and Board of Ethics. And Councilmember Kelly, would you like to speak to this?
Thank you. Yes, I'd like to move that we hold this until our next meeting in July, in the early part of July, so that we can give this ample time for discussion. This is a very important topic to our Evanston community, and I know we have a very loaded agenda this evening.
And also, I'd like to add that you've asked to have a guest
Steve.
speaker come to that meeting, and you and I have discussed this, and that will be on the next agenda.
Okay.
Second.
Second,
Okay. Is there a sec, I don't know who seconded.
Ravel.
Yes, okay. All right, so that has been moved and seconded. I would like to say that because we probably, I hope we can get through these items tonight, but obviously these are for discussion, so we will have to take them up at the next Rules Committee for action. So I would like us to have a July Rules Committee meeting. The first Monday in July is July 5th, which is a national holiday. The natural thing that we would do would be to hold rules on July 6th, but since many folks take that week as vacation. I am asking the city manager and the deputy city manager to poll the council, determine when when all of us, or most all of us, can be next available to participate in a rules committee. So that we don't have to act on that now, but that will happen in the next week so that we can get things on the next rules committee agenda. But yes, so the agenda says that our next rules committee is Monday, August 2nd, except that I believe that as chair, I'm going to call a rules committee for July because we have so many items that are going to be on it. Okay. Okay, now we're moving on to items for discussion. For efficiency's sake, I'm just going to read them in and then we'll have discussion. First is R1, discussion of the rules and organization of the City Council of the City of Evanston. Staff recommends that the members of the Rule Committee review and discuss the City Council rules published December 15th, 2020 for further or potential amendments. And this item is for discussion. And all of us received in our packet a draft proposed revisions for 2021 rules of City Council. These are revisions that my understanding is Councilmember Suffredin and Mayor Biss have made suggestions to the staff about, and I'm not quite sure how we should proceed with this, but we can move. I think we need to move through the document and raise issues as they come up. Obviously, for this, the biggest change is changing the word alderman to alderpersons. That change is going to be made throughout the document. So we aren't going to deal with each one of those. But the next substantial change that I have found is on page 97 of our packet. And that is an addition of Rule 2.7, which reads, the mayor must approve the agenda item before it is published. So I am looking for discussion on that item. Alderman Suffredin.
Oh, sure.
Excuse me. Council member. It's gonna
what I was going to mention is that there are also some proposed changes that did not make it into the red line, and perhaps we could start there and then go through the rules sequentially. Does that make sense?
Do you have a copy of that?
Well, this is what they were. They relate to notes, fiscal notes, equity notes, judicial notes, housing notes, economic development notes, balanced budget notes. And so they would be attached to any proposed legislation, and they would show, for example, how a proposed ordinance would affect our budget, whether, the law department would weigh in on whether or not it would potentially open us up to litigation. So a lot of the information that's contained in the memos under the way that we do things now, but they would be more formalized, and they would be, I would imagine, at the top of any discussion. And so that was just one modification that we had discussed with city staff, but that didn't make it into this. And so I wanted to bring that up and see if there's any appetite to have a discussion about that.
I would, I have Alderman Fleming, I have Fleming, and then Biss, and then Braithwaite. I may just forget that.
I understand. You could just call me Cicely, really. I'd prefer. One thing I was going to say, I see the changes for alderpersons, but to your point, I think I don't know if it was an ordinance or whatever we approved was council member. So I guess for just consistency purposes, if that is what we are planning to be called, which I know we're all trying to get in our vocabulary, then the note should say the rule should say council member, if that's the term we're all using. That's all I wanted to say.
Well, and that's a point I was wondering, I raised with the city staff.
Okay, so you already, okay. All right, and then to council member Suffredin's point, and I have talked to him about this, I do like the idea of notes, but we probably need to flesh it out more so people, so I don't know if Councilmember Suffredin, you want to explain kind of what those notes would be and how we would use them and all that, so then people could digest that.
Sure, and I will defer to Mayor Biss on this as well. This is something that's common in the Illinois General Assembly, and one of the things that, outside of our discussion, is we need to talk about the type of staff resources that would be required. Right. But basically, it is a way of addressing the potential, again, like the ones I'm proposing, and I'm open to others, would be fiscal notes, equity notes, judicial notes, housing notes, economic development notes, and balanced budget notes. So before we make any decision, we would know, for example, does this advance or hinder our equity goals? Does this open us up to potential litigation? Does it close down the potential for litigation, and so forth? I think it would be useful as we consider legislation and as residents consider our consideration of legislation to know things like the price tag, the potential effect on equity goals, the potential, Nick, I think you and I had talked about that. I don't know what type of time. I mean, a lot of this information is already in memos, right? So this would just formalize that. And again, I defer to Mayor Biss. He has firsthand experience with this based on his time in the General Assembly.
So I have Mayor Biss, Councilmember Braithwaite, and Councilmember Newsma. Would you all like to hear from Corporation Counsel first? Before?
No, I'm here in case, because my staff was responsible for the packet piece. So
Okay.
we can, if part of the discussion, I can help try and facilitate that and explain, like, for example, why the notes portion is not in the red line. But we can certainly continue the discussion. I'm just here to answer questions.
Okay. Why don't we go with Mayor Biss?
Thanks, Madam Chair. So let me do what Councilmember Suffren has asked and describe how this works in Springfield. I don't know if your idea is to copy and paste it over. I'm sure there's a lot of other ways to do it, but just for sake of context, the way it works in Springfield is that a member may do what's called filing a note. And what that does is it freezes action on the legislative item until staff is able to fulfill that note and provide that information to council. So for instance, supposing that we hadn't held C2, someone using the Springfield system could have said during the debate on that, gosh, we had a really great public comment that pointed out this fiscal impact question. I'm no longer comfortable voting on this until I know the fiscal impacts. I'm going to file a fiscal note which freezes action on the legislative item until staff is able to deliver a report saying the fiscal impact would be X, at which point then the freeze is lifted and you can go take action. So it's a way to give a council member who is interested in supporting the item but doesn't have enough information a way to freeze action until that information comes in.
So my first reaction is that's sort of an informal way of holding something without having the ability to have it count in terms of the procedural. So how many times could someone freeze something? And I'm just looking at the concern that I would have that something freezes something that
Understood. Yeah.
No, the council member should have asked that question earlier, because it's here for action, or here for introduction, and everything grinds to a halt.
So with continued clarity that I'm not advocating for copying and pasting Springfield, I'm just telling you what I've lived through, that we could copy and paste or modify or discard altogether. The way it works there is there's two guards against it being used as a kind of hostile, take the train off the rails. The first guard is that there's a fixed number of notes, and once they've been fulfilled by staff, the tool is exhausted. So if you're worried about that happening, you could request that staff fulfill those notes on your own item from the jump, so that can't happen later. The other thing, which I think is critical, because of course sometimes there are emergencies, is that the way it works in Springfield, and this I would certainly support copying over if we wanted to do this here, is the majority can just say, no, we're going to move forward anyhow. And so it's not a kind of one person has the tool to just stop everything forever, but it allows the person to say, listen, I think we ought to get information on this, and unless 5 members of council are prepared to say, no, I don't care what the cost is, I'm voting against your request to figure out the cost, then the freeze is maintained. Does that make sense?
Yes, from a procedural standpoint, but I still have a lot more questions, but I'm going to let other people. Councilmember Braithwaite.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and to members of council. I'm looking at this agenda and respectfully Councilman Sufferman, I'd love to read it and educate myself and see what it looks like versus trying to figure it out conceptually with all this information ahead of us. Is this something that you can please share with members of council, and then we can bring it back at the next rules
We're doing
meeting?
that right now. We're at a meeting right now.
Yeah.
This
So,
is a meeting, so do the work at the meeting.
so I'm being asked to figure out a new layer of complexity that I haven't in the matter of years, and as courtesy with the rest of the information that I've had a chance to digest. I'm just saying, I don't know what you're talking about, and I haven't seen it, so I would
Yeah,
love
and
to.
it would come back for a vote. This is the discussion now, and it would come back for a vote at the next meeting.
Again, my comments, not yours. It would have been nice to be able to see what you were talking about physically.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes, go ahead.
Good afternoon, members of the Rules Committee. Nicholas Cummings, Corporation Counsel. So my staff was responsible for incorporating the changes that were suggested by the council and Mayor Biss. I excluded the notes piece from the red line because I didn't know where to put them in the rules. And so now with Mayor Biss's explanation, it does sound like a revision to 1812. And I don't know if that's a discussion that the Rules Committee would like to have to amend, discuss, and it's not on the agenda, but a discussion concerning amending 18.12 to revise how items are held, right? Because right now it requires two, like we just held C2. So 2 people said, yes, I want to hold it. There was no objection to overrule it. It's held. If the notes then supersede that, maybe that's a discussion that the Rules Committee wants to have, and it'd be a majority instead of 2/3. Like, if that's the discussion, then we can make that revision in time for it to come up for a vote. But it sounds to me as the, because I didn't know where to put it, now it seems to be the best place to put it is 1812.
And,
Okay.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes, Councilmember.
And I think the goal is to not create another implement for people to hold things, but for people to have information when they make their votes. And just use an example from our previous meeting, we shouldn't have the director of Parks and Recreation answering fiscal questions at the podium on something. We should get an answer from the CFO ahead of time. And that's what I think would allow us all to make better decisions. And that's the goal of this. And, Nick, if I didn't give you enough information, I apologize. But I think the important thing is, rather than this being like a hostile action by somebody who wants to hold a vote, this be something that you could request well ahead of time when something is on the city manager's report, or at some point when we know it's on an upcoming agenda. It wouldn't be necessarily appropriate to ask for a housing note on something relating to the beaches, but it is appropriate to ask for economic development to take a look, or for the law department to take a look at, et cetera. There are appropriate notes, and if we can structure our note system in a way that gives enough advance notice to staff, we can probably get better information and eliminate what has happened at meetings where you have staff who aren't necessarily the right people to answering questions because they happen to be the one at the microphone.
Can I ask
Yes.
the committee, and I know I've talked to you about this individually, but would it be something that you guys wanted to see change in the structure of the transmittal memos that are attached? And because admittedly, this is something that I've talked about internally, but we were waiting for direction from you all. So if you want us to amend the transmittal memo to include those sections, and so that all of those areas are addressed, that would be another way to get the information that you're looking for as well.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. I have a whole list of people who haven't been called on yet. Let me get to them. So Alderman, Councilmember Newsma.
Thank you. That's where my mind goes, is to something that would go at the front of every transmittal memo to council. A list of whatever categories we deem appropriate, many of which may not be applicable to any particular topic, but simple NA in that box would suffice. But that will give us more information up front about those priorities which we deem significant. Equity, budget. I would like to see our CARP environmental goals being one of those categories. Is this the city council goals? Does this speak to a process where we need to revisit our city council goals? And it would be one way that we would put these goals to practical use. I'd like to talk about that. So I like the idea, if that's where it's headed. Looking to the Illinois General Assembly as the bastion of efficiency and effectiveness is probably not going to get us where we need to go.
Right. So I'm just going to jump in a little bit here. I think this is a good idea, Alderman Sufferton. We've begun doing that somewhat because we talk about when we are funding certain things, what fund the amount of money is coming from, but frequently a question that happens at the council is how much is left in the fund. So that would be, that's sort of an automatic. Now that's frequently incorporated from Economic Development Committee. Councilmember Newsma, we do have council goals that we have in our memos gotten this meets this goal, this addresses this goal, this fits in with that goal. So amplifying that with additional information like Councilmember Sufferton is suggesting, I think is useful and does move the whole discussion along much further because those questions are answered frequently that we would ask. Now I want to go back to Councilmember Kelly.
Yes, Mayor Biss or Tom, could you tell us if there's a time frame attached to, like in Springfield, how does this work with the fulfillment of the notes? I'm just concerned in terms of, prolonging action.
I would just say, like, Springfield doesn't really provide, like, a great model because, for example, in the House, you're talking about 118 people and full-time staff and, partisan legislature. I mean, I think the concept of notes, this doesn't need to work the way it does in Springfield. And I think kind of what we just discussed where this would be at the top of everything, assuming that we come up with a list that's reasonable and, housing notes would be non-applicable on most things. I think there would be very few things that we would discuss that would require notes in every category. Really, probably, it'd be an amazing thing. So I think the way that this works in Springfield isn't really relevant to how we'd have it work here. It's important that we have the staff resources and the advance notice, because I don't anticipate that it would be used as a hostile maneuver to delay anything, and we could certainly write the rule in a way that makes that not possible by requiring a note request to get in advance. This is kind of part of the whole discussion we've had about agendas being put out with greater notice than they have been, or the city manager's report. We could all kind of see what's moving through the process and what's, on deck and what's in the hole. And it's like when something's in the hole, that's when you need to request a note. So I'm happy to talk to you about how it works in Springfield, but I think like the important thing is that we tailor whatever it is to our purposes here. And the real goal is not to provide a hostile tool to play gotcha games with people's proposals, but to get information so that we can make the best choices and that people understand that we are either paying attention to fiscal notes or disregarding them. And if that's the case, like we all need to explain why.
Okay.
So like with a hold, there is sort of a time frame, right? That would be a distinction. Right now, a hold does proceed. So just, I agree with you. So if we can tailor it to.
Yeah, again, in this, like, as we're formulating this, my goal, if possible, would be to have all the note requests come ahead of the meeting where this is going to be discussed. Rather than we get here, there are people here offering public comment, everyone's expecting something, and then somebody says, wait a minute, I'd like to know how this affects our CARP goals, and everyone has to go home and come back in 2 weeks. Like, I think we can, with staff's input on what their workflow would be, come up with a way where these notes requests are happening well in advance of the meeting.
Well, and also perhaps build them in to the point where it becomes automatic in what's generated by staff. So that if it's not there, it's actually unusual. So that having that the budget implications, the CARP implications, whatever the staff sees, be, as Councilmember Newsma was saying, it's a checklist. And so you provide the staff provides the information unless they see it doesn't.
Okay. I think that's a great idea. My only concern, and I guess, Kelly, this would be your role here, is I would imagine that there will be a lot more fiscal notes required. I think that would be the greatest workload. And like, do we have capacity there? Would we get, I also don't want, I don't want us to get information that's inaccurate because people are getting a lot thrown at them. And some of this is speculative in nature anyway, right? Like economic development is a guessing game, an educated guessing game. So, how do we tailor it? And like maybe, if we go forward with this, should we revisit it in a year's time or in some interval where we can see how it's been affecting staff?
Kelly Gandersky, Deputy City Manager. Good evening. I think that it's something that we do see quite often. I know Chicago considers fiscal impacts. They have to run this through a checklist of things before items make the agenda. I think it's something that the city could definitely build into a transmittal memo and can do. I just think we'd have to revisit what's a reasonable amount of time for that to happen. Certainly, if there was an emergency, we would need to move a little faster to place items on the agenda, but we would have to take a look and see how many items the council would want in that memo, and then realistically the impact to go through each department to get that information to be placed on the agenda. As it stands now, staff work at least a week in advance to get things on the agenda. So I imagine that would bump that back, but we'd have to look at the time frame for that.
Okay, and if I may, one of the things too is, in an emergency situation, we could all vote to waive notes on something. And just as an example, recently, I think the repairs to the Fire Station 4,
right?
We had to do that, so we don't need to have everyone go through. And that we could decide if that would be an unanimous vote or a majority vote or what.
I think for staff's purposes, it would just be very important for the council to define exactly what they were looking for in those categories.
Okay.
All right. So Councilmember Fleming.
So just, I do like this idea, and I understand what you mean, Councilmember Braithwaite, because you're right, it's not in front of us. I'm a very visual learner. But now that we've kind of had a discussion about it, I think it just makes sense, because we all sit here and there's different things we're looking for, and we're asking questions, and staff might not be prepared, and then it goes back, and, it just causes, in my opinion, some frustration. So if my suggestion would be, particularly if you make the referral, and we'll get to this point, I think, later, but if you make the referral, then you need to be clear on what you're looking for. I mean, if you want some really specific fiscal information, right, or legal information, right? And I'm not thinking that this is like a whole separate memo. This is a paragraph, and you're right, Councilmember, when we used to get more stuff, I remember in the memos would kind of have these headers of things, and they've kind of fallen off. But we could say, hey, I like your thing with the beach. I want X, Y, and Z about beach access to be included in this memo, and then we could have all had a better conversation, I think, coming into it. And that seems to me like it shouldn't take so much time. We should be reasonable with our request, but if you're putting a referral in and you say you want these things, I mean, I think if it's going to be a huge problem, that's the city manager's department to call us and say, we can get this part, but not this part, or whatever that might be, right? But we do have to, in my opinion, have some expectations of staff when they deliver memos so they can be thorough, so we can have productive conversations up here that we can then explain to our residents why we did or did not do something. So I'm super supportive of the idea just as part of a memo, not a separate memo. And I think us all being reasonable about what we're asking and what that turnaround looks like, and also staff knowing that we're not looking for a dissertation, but we're just looking for, some clarity around the issue for us to make our decisions. And I definitely would not support it as something that, I could just arbitrarily hold someone's thing because I want information. I think we have to do our due diligence to make sure what we're looking for is provided as early as possible. So that is my opinion about that. Yes, I do not want to replicate the state. And I do think, Jonathan, to your point, if we had council goals, maybe that's not necessarily so flushed out as something like financials. But if we used to have the equity goals on memos at some point, that didn't last very long. But I think if we have council goals, we'll have to decide as a new council. The staff can kind of check what goals this hits, and then those other things are supplemental. And I would think they're only legal. What did we say? Legal, financial,
equity.
What did you say, Tom?
Yeah, and this is just a starting point. But the ones we had talked about were fiscal, equity, judicial, housing, economic development, balanced budget, and then CARP got brought up. We don't have to do all those. I mean, we could do additional ones.
Yeah, for me, I would say, and I love equity, but I think equity was more of a, unless it's something very prudent, it's maybe just more of a checkbox. This touches on our equity goals or it doesn't. I don't know if we need a memo. But again, just speaking off the cusp, I do think we should try to move this through, because we're going to be making some pretty big decisions heading into the budget, and it'd be good to know, particularly financially, what each implication is as we vote for things. And then as we think about the rescue fund, right? Mm-hmm. That's probably definitely a way we want to use these notes as we're moving forward for those decisions.
So if I can ask, Madam Chair, then from direction from the committee, if this is going to be an actual rule of city council, if so, where, or if this is going to be direction to city staff as like a policy thing that you guys want to see this in our transmittal memos. I'm just looking for direction as to, so I can make sure that my staff actually either updates the rules, or if we're just going to have to take this back to the city manager and say, this is what the Rules Committee wants.
Well, currently, we don't have anything about the memos in our rules, correct?
I think,
Correct.
right. Take it back as a policy, because we're describing this.
Could we make sure that's implemented, though? I mean, I don't want it to go back as so I guess I want to be clear. We're taking it back as a policy, meaning this is what we're looking for in the memos, not something like, and if you have time, please add these things.
No,
So I don't know, again, how we need to word it to make sure it actually happens.
I think that I would say that this will be our policy going forward as to what is the standard memo that is received by the city council with respect to items on the city council agenda. That every item memo regarding an item on the agenda will have this, and this.
Resolutions and ordinances.
Yeah.
And Madam Chair, if I could just add,
Right.
I mean, I voiced concerns, and thank you for speaking to it, Councilman Fleming, just because I couldn't visually understand what was being said, and I was upset. I'm like, I don't study state legislator, and I don't want to bring in Springfield practices, but benefit of a discussion is I understand. And so my question is, if staff has clear on the direction of this discussion, we can move forward, and then if you need to touch base with with Councilman Suffredin or Biss or anybody else before it comes back to us, then we can just move on to the next agenda item.
Yeah. If I may, my only concern is with regard to a possible hold if one of these items doesn't make it. I think that would be a rule.
Right.
And so I think what we will need to do is we will need to bring back something in writing, because I don't understand how we can have a policy on one hand and a rule on the other.
Makes sense.
Yeah,
And that's the kind of direction that I was looking for, as to where in the rules it should go. I know when we were hearing from Mayor Biss, I initially thought it would go 1812 to modify the hold rule. But if it's going to be a requirement that our transmittal memos now have these sections, because I have Councilmember Suffredin's list, if our transmittal memos now have these sections that each of these items are addressed, then I just need to know what rule we're going to change if it's insufficient or something like that.
If I might suggest a proposed change to a rule with regard to the hold of those items, and then a resolution with regard to the exact items that are wanted for the transmittal memo. Then we would have something in writing on both sides.
All right. Who have I got here? Councilmember Reed, then I have Mayor Biss, and then Councilmember Newsma.
Thank you. I agree with some of the comments that were made earlier that, the hold is a mechanism that we have to hold these items. So I think using the notes to hold items may not be the greatest, because we can just use the regular process. But I do think the notes is would be very beneficial. I think that, the notes should be tied to our goals. And so I think Alderman Suffredin was right in kind of providing that sample list of things. I think it should align with our goals. I agree with Councilmember Kelly that I would have a concern about the delay of items, if we were just using this and it could be seen as hostile. And I think that's mostly been addressed through discussion here. But also I think we should address how soon we expect city staff to get back to us with requests for records. I mean, if for example, whether it's a note, I don't know if we need city staff to be our brains for us all the time and create a memo, but sometimes just providing the data that we ask for in a timely fashion. And, I think we should set a time frame that we expect staff to get back to a request from aldermen. I mean, if I was, as a private resident, I can request information and, presumably under FOIA, receive it in 5 days. As an alderman, I should be able to receive that information fairly quickly to assist with my legislative duties. And currently that is under our code. City staff should be providing records to us. And so I think we should, make sure we're also separating the two, making sure that we're, when we're requesting records, we're getting it, and that we're not relying on staff to necessarily decipher the records for us all the time. And
All right. Okay. Next we have Mayor Biss.
Thanks. Yeah, I would just say that I would be and I think we sort of landed here, I believe, but I want to say it clearly. I would be uneasy leaving this out of the rules. I think it's worth having clarity on this concept, however, whatever direction we want to go with it in the rules. I think it's my instinct is that it's a mistake to have a universal expectation on every item that appears on an agenda. I think that I think might be creating make work. And so having some discretion where a council member can ask built into the way we handle this, I think makes a lot of sense. I hear what everyone's saying. I think making that request only in order well before the final vote so that it cannot be used as a hold is just a matter of the calendar, I think makes a lot of sense. And I'd be happy to put together a draft or to work with anyone who's doing that. But I would support having some discretion so we don't just have an infinite amount of sort of busy work that's generated, and B, having it explicitly in the rules so that everyone has complete clarity on how exactly it works.
Well, from the staff perspective, my understanding was that the notes would apply to specifically resolutions and ordinances. And if I'm incorrect, then let me know, but I did not think it would be on every single item on the agenda, only for quote unquote legislation, so resolutions and ordinances.
Well,
Yes, Councilmember.
I'm sorry, but it would be, I guess I want to back up because we have things that come for discussion and then they go for introduction. And so they're not necessarily resolutions and ordinances when they get started, right? And so I guess you're saying if I make a referral to paint the sky purple, that's my favorite one. On that referral, could I say I want a fiscal note on what that cost would be? I mean, it's not yet a piece of legislation, but I'm trying to get that direction. But this note might help me figure that part out, right?
And I think that was part of what Councilmember Suffredin and Mayor Biss were saying. Like it's a member of the body. It's their desire to have this information. And so when you're making a referral, absolutely, that would be a great time to ask for that information.
But I'm saying when you said it's only a resolution or whatever, at that point when I'm making it, it's not yet anything.
Correct.
Okay.
But when it comes back, it will, because you made a referral, when it comes back, it should have that information attached to it.
Right.
Because you specifically requested it. To Mayor Biss's point, it's discretion. But my understanding in terms of the way it was presented originally is that when we bring forth an ordinance or resolution, there will be these sort of notes attached. Understanding that there are items that come on the agenda essentially for spending money or signing contracts, authority to do so, that are not legislation that would not have these notes. And so if that were the case where you would want those, then it would be every single item essentially on the agenda. But I'm just trying to get direction as to if it's narrowed down to just legislation or if it's everything. That's all.
Well, I think we've gotten a lot more information, and since we are having a meeting in July, a Rules Committee meeting in July, can we continue this discussion there? And after the staff has looked at this more, and can you come back to us in July with what you would propose how we change the rules?
Sure, I'll talk to everyone I need to talk to see where we can put it in the rules, and I know Mayor Biss has said he'll work with anyone to help draft some language to where it should go appropriately. Honestly, that's just, I didn't know where it would go, so that's why it's not here right now. So,
all right. Well, thank you. Well, there were a lot of things to change. So, I think we do have a number of things on there.
May I just ask a procedural question?
Yes.
By not voting now, does that mean that when a recommendation comes back, it will not be ripe for a vote to be included in the rules in July? We would then have to wait until our August meeting to be included?
Well, can we vote on this now? Because this was not noticed so this was just a discussion item.
Yeah, that's why I shared it.
But we're giving him direction now.
Point of order.
So if we bring it back for action in July, we could bring something back for action in July.
We're not taking. I'm sorry. Point of order.
Yes.
We could vote on something now. We're not taking final action because it would come back to the committee. So we could give through our through our vote saying this is what we want you to bring back to us for action. So we can vote on something as long as we're not taking final action, which this wouldn't be.
Well, it would just be a straw vote. So I think that usually
we
don't
beat
take-
this to death. Staff has enough.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we do.
Come back with something that we're ready to vote on when it comes back.
Yeah, yeah, that was my point.
In July, we can make the final vote on this, and then it can go to council.
Yes,
We can have something ready by July.
yeah, for sure. Okay,
Vote on July on something we're going to adopt in July.
yeah. Can you turn your mic on next time?
I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. Okay, okay, so it's, it's 5 of 5, but that was an important issue to cover. So we have a number of other things in this red line draft to discuss, and I'm going to proceed through them as they have come up. And so the first item that I am finding, and please let me know if you found something else before this, is Rule 2.7, the mayor must approve the agenda item before it is published.
I think 2.1A has a typo in it, actually, on the previous page.
Yes. Okay.
That wasn't my request, but I assume that what's meant here is that the city clerk has a spot on our agenda, which is not named in the rules. So I assume this was trying to add that into the rules, but it also seems to delete the mayor and city manager.
Yes, I had a question about that. I think it depends on, we should make this clearer, that there should be mayor, comma, city manager, and city clerk public announcements,
Okay.
or mayor and city clerk public announcements and report of the city manager?
Or
I'm sorry, yes,
So-
Councilmember Reed?
Yes, currently, I think we could clarify, it. Currently, the communications of the clerk is utilized in that way. That's what I and previous clerks had used as kind of our public announcements. I think if we, clarified what communications of the clerk is, because it's not clear that the clerk can just make public announcements at the time. It's really, as it's currently written, the clerk should just be reporting out on communications received by the clerk that are addressed to the full body. So I think that's the clarification we want to make here.
So B is communications addressed to the council. Is that what you're talking about, where the city clerk usually has communications?
Yes, yeah.
So is it your proposal then, and, we can, I guess, take general consent, that it just, the A be the mayor and city manager, and then B be city clerk communications addressed to the council?
City clerk communications. So it can be addressed to the council, or if the clerk is just making an announcement, they make the announcement.
Okay, so A, 2.1A would remain mayor and city manager, public announcements, and report of the city manager. And then B would be amended to say communications from
Of the
City
clerk.
clerk.
from the city clerk addressed to the city council?
Just communications of the clerk.
Okay, all right, communication, all right, yeah. Is that acceptable to everybody? Okay, all right, okay, and then you can bring that back. All right, okay, so thank you for that. So next, I'm returning again to 2.7. The mayor must approve the agenda item before it is published. At this point, Mayor Biss, did you want to go ahead and speak to that?
Sure, and I think there's also a typo there, the word item should be struck. But my view here is that, I preside over the meeting. I think people in the community sort of hold me responsible as mayor for what is on the agenda. And so consistent with that responsibility, I would feel more comfortable if I saw and approved the agenda before it went out.
Don't you meet with the city manager on a regular basis?
I do. So Councilmember Braithwaite asked if I meet with the city manager on a regular basis. I do. We talk about the agenda in every instance. I think having this clearly laid out matters, right? You could imagine a situation where there's a controversial item, and I want to use the fact that it's not really something I saw to kind of hide, and then the residents are like, well, now, hold on. We voted for you to be the mayor, and now we're mad at you about what's on the agenda, the meeting you're presiding over, and when we complain to you about it, you just say, don't talk to me, talk to the city manager. That strikes me as not a great accountability system. It would be easier for me to be able to hide in that way, be politically pleasant, but I don't think it's the right way to have clarity with the residents about the lines of accountability.
Councilmember Braithwaite.
Thank you, Chairman. So we all have that opportunity, and I guess you may hear me ask this again, like, are we a solution trying to find a problem? And whether it's myself, Councilman Burns, Councilman Suffredin, Ravel, we see the agenda in advance. You get to see it in the city manager's notes. It comes out every week. I guess I'll be direct. I mean, I'm trying to understand the problem that we're trying to fix. If I see something, you see something in an agenda, clearly we can hold it without having to legislate it and rewrite a rule. And I'll just stop there.
Mayor Biss, did you want to respond?
I mean, I'll just reiterate my point. I think having an ambiguity about where the agenda comes from and who's really to be held accountable for it is it's confusing for residents. And I would welcome the accountability of the rules saying, listen, if this is on the agenda and you don't like it, complain to the mayor because it's the mayor's fault. I think that's the right way to do clarity and accountability in a situation like this.
Councilmember Reed?
Yes, I support this change. I do think, my understanding, and maybe Councilor Cummings, you can look into this at a later date, or anyone else who may just know this offhand. My recollection of the reading of the state statute regarding the powers and duties of the mayor is that the state statute says that the mayor has the ability to set and the responsibility to set the agenda as the head of the public body. And I think it fully makes sense that the mayor would set the agenda with the advice of the city manager, but certainly ultimately the mayor is responsible for its own agenda, and allow the mayor to manage what gets on the agenda and the time that it may take to discuss certain items. I think committee chair folks should also have that same authority to set the agenda for their various committees. And so I am supportive of this. It makes sense for accountability, and it makes sense to increase, as I said, accountability.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Yes, Councilmember Newsman.
I'm supportive of this proposed change as well, for the reasons previously stated.
Okay. All right. We'll keep this on for action for the Rules Committee meeting in July.
Just a point of clarification. My expectation was to bring back the entire document.
Okay.
And I just wanted to find out from the Rules Committee if you wanted to or expected to vote on individual changes or just the entire document. So my expectation was to bring back the entire document. I just want to make sure that that's your expectation.
Yes, I think that is our expectation.
Okay.
Okay. But that could change. Okay. Next is, I'm moving through this, is
Item
5.3.
5.3.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes, go ahead, Councilmember.
I don't know that we need to, if we just have a dedicated place on the website, I feel like that solves that problem, and we're not taking out ads in newspapers that don't exist anymore. If that's the reason for that change, and if it's all right with everybody, it seems like that would be like a very convenient and logical place for a person looking to apply for a vacancy to look.
Sorry, Madam Chair, there's a point of clarity I'd like, and it apparently didn't make it on this agenda, but there's a conflict between 5.1 and 5.2 that I don't know if the Rules Committee would like to just address today. 5.1 requires 3 weeks notice. I'm sorry, one week notice. It's been amended to 2 weeks notice, but then 5.2 requires 3 weeks notice. So
we should clarify that.
It could be 2, it could be 3. I just want it to be the same, or we can strike one of.
Yeah, it seems like we should pick a number, put that number in 5.1 and strike 5.2, I would think. Because when I first read the rules, I was like, I'm being given 2 incompatible assignments.
All right. What discussion on whether the notice to council members?
For appointment to committees, when the mayor appoints.
Yes.
So the red line includes 2 weeks. The original was 1 week, and then 5.2 says 3 weeks.
So does this mean in terms of these appointments shall be introduced at one city council meeting and then acted on the second city council meeting?
So
Or-
this just talks about the mayor submitting it to the council in advance of their approval. How soon in advance the mayor has to give it to you to consider before it's actually even voted on. Irrespective of when the vote's going to occur,
Okay.
there's a certain amount of notice that the mayor has to give city council.
Right. What has been happening now, Ms. Franchel?
A week. It's been a week, yeah.
Okay. All right, how does the council feel? Do we want another week? Do we want to leave it as it is?
I think 2 weeks is appropriate, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
All
so
right.
we'll leave that red line, and then do you want staff to strike 5.2?
Makes
Yes,
sense.
I think that makes sense.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Then back to 5.3. So this is essentially posting all of our vacancies for boards and commissions on the city's website and eliminating communications of general circulation within the community. Councilmember Newsman.
I think the proposed change makes sense. I'd also like to talk about the implicit two-term limit imposed on committee members, and that's, I guess, been standard practice over the years. I'm not sure if that's been a problem, but just wanted to take an opportunity to discuss that if anyone thinks we should lift that or change that.
I think that has worked well. I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't extend it. But I think there's value in having people serve 2 terms because they get the experience and then they've learned the ropes and then we get the value of their serving. And then they're there as a continuum to bring in new members as that changes over. Okay. All right, so yes, Alderman Burns. Councilmember Burns.
Why are we not sharing information about vacancies in every possible way? I just want to know what the thinking is behind striking this.
It's not free to advertise in publications. If we put it in our website, it's free. Like I said, I think it's logical that someone would look not in the newspaper, but on our website if they wish to participate in a vacancy. It doesn't prohibit us from publicizing it any other way as well, but it just saves us the cost of having to put notification into publication.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I read this as like newsletters, email newsletters, stuff like that. So
yeah, you can put it where,
yeah, I just want to make sure
you can do additional stuff.
That we are doing that. I almost would like to see that written into the rules. Right, yeah, I'd like to see that written into the rules, that we do share it, newsletters, whatever, ward notices. But I agree, yeah, we don't need to put it in the publication yet.
Well, we can amend the language to list it on city's website and all city e-newsletters as appropriate.
Yeah.
Okay. Councilmember Burns, is that acceptable? Yep. Okay, all right. Mr. Cummings, did you get that?
I'm writing it down.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's move on to, the next rule is 5.7. The mayor can replace a member, the proposed change. Yes, Mayor Biss, did you want to go ahead?
If I could speak to 5.8 and 5.7
Yes, go right
together.
ahead.
So the proposal 5.8 is that the mayor populates standing committees by appointment with advice and consent of the council. I want us to strike that from discussion. Because I know that there's a variety of different opinions about it, and this is not a ripe issue until the next council is sworn in May of 2025. We've got a lot of time to worry about it. I'm not dogmatic about this particular approach. It just was the natural one that came to my mind. What I do think, though, having thought about the Rules Committee meeting we had 2 weeks ago, was that I don't think the way we handled this question of committee assignments worked very well. I think it was a little haphazard, and we sort of lurched around. And I would like us to, over the course of the next 4 years, think about a more systematic way to handle the committee assignments process that we can have in place well in advance of May of 2025. So unless anyone strongly disagrees, I'd like to remove 5.8 from discussion. But that leads me to 5.7. One of the consequences of what we did 2 weeks ago was that many of the committees grew. Therefore, the quorum requirements increased in a number of different situations. And 5.7, which I will fully grant, I think when you first read it sounds a little bit wacky, is a narrow and modest thing, which simply says if a council member is on a committee and wants to allow someone else to sub in for them, the mayor can write an email to the clerk or something that makes that happen. So if you're out of town, we can sub somebody in for you. If you happen to have an issue in your ward that's really important to you coming before a committee, but you're not on that committee, you can request to sub in for someone and that person can let you do it. It's just a modest tool that I think could come in handy, particularly as so many of our committees have grown.
Can I then ask a question with that language for 5.7? Because I read it when it says standing committee, that's a term of art to me. There are only a certain number of standing committees of the city council. That's a standing committee to me. So like rules, P&D, APW. But if you're talking about boards, commissions, and committees, so you only mean for the standing committees? Okay.
So I was with you, Mayor Biss, until you said that someone, if it's an issue in their ward, that they request to swap in and swap out. When something like that has happened in the past, a council member will go to that committee and request an opportunity to speak and have a discussion with the committee members, but not ask to swap seats with someone. I think that's not appropriate. I think it is appropriate when, for, as you said, quorum purposes, when someone for some reason cannot make a meeting, that they can ask to have someone stand in for them for just that meeting. But traditionally, what we have done, for instance, if we have something at at P&D and that the council member doesn't serve on P&D, they come before P&D to express their view and their opinion, and they're recognized by the chair and recognized as the council member for that ward, or has some specific specialized knowledge of that.
Yeah, and I would imagine that would be the way we would handle it as well. I don't have a concern about leaving the ability to do this enumerated without purpose, so that we don't say in the rules, here's the number of miles away from the civic center you must be in order to be replaceable in this context. I think the point is it only happens with everyone's consent. There's no situation when any swap happens unless the person being replaced wants it and the person replacing them wants it, and then the email gets sent to the clerk.
Okay. Any other discussion on this? Okay, all right. Moving along. All right, the next.
So I'm sorry, just for direction, you're asking to strike 5.8 altogether, leave 5.7?
Yes.
And then there is a change that is in comment on 6.2 that I wanted to point out to the committee. It's not a red line change, there's a comment that says council, suffered in remote participation. And so what I think that refers to is the second full sentence where it starts with only individuals physically present at the meeting are permitted to participate in public comment. And no electronic communication methods will be permitted for persons that seek to participate remotely in public comment need to be stricken.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Clearly, we've been violating that, so. Except
well, I think we had to because of the pandemic, but.
Yes, but no, we should strike that.
Okay.
Unless the council wants.
And I just wanted to make sure that was appropriate, that's what the committee wanted, because there was a comment there, and I just want to make sure that was what the intent was, to strike those portions.
Certainly, we have to keep doing that now, but when we are fully back in business, do we want to?
Well, that's a good question.
Allow public comment via Zoom?
We have to follow the Open Meetings Act, which requires us to allow public comment in person. I don't think that there's any limitation to us allowing public comment through other technological means. Just previously, the rule was you couldn't do it except for if you were disabled or something like that. And so if the council wants to, as we learned from Elrod Freeman, we just have to allow for it. The council sets the rules on how it gets done.
I think I'd be in favor of allowing ongoing remote participation in the interest of transparency and engagement.
The question is, does it violate the Open Meetings Act?
To do remote participation?
Yes.
No. Again, the Open Meetings Act only requires that we allow public comment. The means by which it's done is regulated by the council.
I'm not sure I followed you there. Could you?
So we just have to allow public comment, whether it be, and the people have to be allowed in the place if you guys are meeting in person under normal Open Meetings Act rules. So they can participate in public comment in person, right?
Right.
But there's no state law that says we cannot allow remote participation. The only state law under the Open Meetings Act is that we have public comment, period. And so how public comment happens is up to the council.
All right. Councilmember Reed, you had your light on? Thank you.
Yeah, I do think we should continue this practice of allowing public comment to be remote. And I also think we should, as we're going through this, look at, we have a restriction here that only allows council members to attend a meeting remotely once per year. I think we should strike that rule as well and allow council members to appear remote as they see.
So, I'm sorry.
Oh, Councilor Cummings, please.
It is in the rules. I can't remember what rule number it is either, but it is in city council rules. But I think that was to be consistent with the prior Open Meetings Act. And so once, and I think it's at the end of June, the last I saw, once the governor's declaration of disaster expires, we will have to go back to the old rules, which under the Open Meetings Act requires sort of like a reason, and there's a certain number of meetings in which you can participate remotely. So I don't have a problem with your suggestion, but I just wanted to make everyone aware that the Open Meetings Act still has some of those similar restrictions.
Yeah, just from my recollection, the Open Meetings Act, it does require a reason, but it doesn't set a limit on how many times you can use, the valid reason. Ours specifically says no more than once, and OMA just says, you have to be out for work or for whatever reason, from my recollection. Thank you.
I think that we should require council members to be present unless they are providing a particular reason. I think it really is important that we meet in person when we can meet in person, unless someone has some type of emergency or is ill. What we've done in the past is we have allowed members to participate when they are recuperating at home or have had an emergency that takes them out of state. I think the limiting them to one of those participations a year seems antiquated, but I do think that we should require council members to be present unless they have provide a significant reason why they can't be.
And would this apply to committee meetings as well? Or should we allow council members
I think it should apply to committee meetings. I don't know what the rest of the council feels like, but I think it's important to apply to committee meetings as well. I mean, there is a difference between meeting in person and having someone participate remotely when everyone else is present.
So I support taking the one out, but leaving, with calls, but not having it just be one. I do remember missing a meeting during my last tenure because I had used my one, and so I could not participate remotely for the next. So I would just say that we keep the calls in there, but we remove the one.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And then if we feel like there's somebody who's abusing it, then as adults, we can talk to each other about that.
Right. No, and I agree with that, Councilmember Fleming, but I do think we do want to have people provide a reason and have it be legitimate, because I do think there is, I think it's important that we still continue to meet in person when we're able to, but I didn't, we should have lifted that for you. So.
Okay. This is Rule 21.2.
Thank you.
Okay.
Which we'll get to.
Okay.
Eventually.
All right. Where are we now?
We're still on 6.2.
Okay. So
I guess we're
is
at
that
9 now.
I am looking and I don't see anything else from anyone else. So are we agreed that you can participate, a council member can participate in committee or standing committee or council remotely, but only after they have provided a a reason for their absence. Oh, we're still talking about public, okay. Oh, thank you, sorry, Jonathan, I didn't realize that. So remote participation, I think we do want to, the feeling is as long as we're not violating the Open Meetings Act, we should move forward with remote participation. It will really open up the council meetings to many more people. So are we all agreed on that? All right, good, all right. All right, let's keep moving.
Are we on
We're at Rule
6.3
9.
or keep moving
Wait,
through 6.2?
what is the next one that has something? I'm sorry,
Oh, just jump
I think the
down.
next thing that has an edit is
8.4.
in 9.
8.4.
8.4, yes, I'm
8.4,
sorry.
all right, let's move to 8.4. This is consideration of confidential information shall be consistent with the Open Meetings Act, and alderperson who has a question about the confidentiality of an item should exercise a good faith effort in contacting the law department. Yes, first to discuss the confidentiality of the item before requesting that the council consider its confidentiality. All right, any other discussion on that? That makes sense to me.
Is there a, sorry, Madam Chair, is there a discipline if the council member doesn't do that, or is there, what's the
I think
Well,
the way this is written, and it can be changed at the committee's pleasure, is that it's whether we consider an item on the agenda in a public meeting, and if there's some question about its confidentiality, to consult my office, not necessarily a matter of retaining items of confidentiality. So that's the way I'm reading it.
so this is when, if you have a question about whether an item on the agenda should be considered confidential, they contact the legal department.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
And
Rather
whether-
than contacting the mayor. Yeah, so this is just changing the person you contact from the mayor to the legal department. Not
But-
changing whether something is confidential, it's who you consult to determine that it's
Correct.
confidential.
So it's not a matter of discipline or consequences of failing to ask. It's just
It's
if you
the
have a question.
procedure to,
yeah.
it's the procedure to follow in order to determine confidentiality. Is that clear to everyone? Okay. All right, moving forward now. So now we're at 9.2, and this is under standing committees. There shall be 4 standing committees of the City Council Rules, AMPW, Human Services, P&D, and a Finance Committee. Now, do we want to take this up right now to discuss whether we have a Finance Committee?
I think that makes sense since we're here. I know it's item number A4 on the agenda, but if we can just do it now, we don't have to go back to that.
Okay, all right. All right, let's open it up then.
All right, I'm happy to speak to this. It is in the packet.
Yes, go right ahead, Alderman Flynn.
Oh, thank you, I'm sorry. It is in the packet. I made the referral some time ago. My thought, after 4 years on the council, is that we do get budget updates, but they're not necessarily easy to digest on the floor and ask questions and have a discussion. And so I thought about having a budget subcommittee, a finance subcommittee. I know Councilmember Kelly and I worked on what our proposal for that committee would be that should have been given to everybody. Am I correct on that? Yes, okay.
Yes.
Just wanted to make sure. And so it just kind of models our other committees that would be chaired by someone out of the finance team as well, whether it's a CFO or someone they designate. I think we said meeting monthly, just following the standard protocols. We understand that this committee would work like the others, so they could make recommendations that then go up to city council, but they are not, making policy changes within the committee body. Our thought was that our proposal was that we would split time on this, and so half the council would serve for 2 years, the second half would serve for 2 years, obviously understanding based on everyone's full-time schedule, we might have to be flexible with the date and such, but being that the budget is something that's really important, and I know personally the way that it's been done, we start talking about the budget in the fall, but it's really presented to us and so on and so forth. And so that had been a little bit hard to digest. And then with more citizen involvement, lots of citizens have questions about the budget. And so my opinion is personally, and I think it would be good for us to just kind of have more time to talk about the budget. This just isn't APW or at the beginning of a council meeting when we might have another full night. And so we don't have really the bandwidth or the time to digest everything. And then given the amount of residents we have in our community who have expertise or experience with budget matters, I know we have a lot of people who are interested in pensions and such, that they would have an opportunity to be appointed by the mayor to this committee and serve time as well.
Okay. Mayor Biss, thank you. Councilmember Fleming.
I mean, so first of all, I think this is a great idea. I've joked with some members of council in talking about this that I serve on the board of a nonprofit with a $500,000 budget, and we have a finance committee, and it seems like the city of Evanston is with a higher degree of financial complexity should have one as well. I just have two questions, and I shared this with you by email as well, council member. One is regarding item 2. I'm looking now at the list of 7 items in the purpose, which is on page 126 of the packet. So the last item is proposed financial and budgeting policies for adoption by the city council, which is a kind of an advisory role, which I think makes sense. Item 2 is provide goals for the annual and long-range budget process, which I'm curious as to why that says provide goals as opposed to propose goals for adoption by the city council. And the other question I have is on item 5, which is review and recommend funding of the city's pension and retirement plans. I would just love some guidance, perhaps from the law department, regarding the jurisdiction of the pension boards and the role that an external entity could play when it comes to funding recommendations for pensions.
So before you go, I'm sorry, just so I can clarify what we were thinking there, and Councilmember Kelly can jump in. So I think 2, and we had some different language, and so we've gone back and forth, but, this group, again, advisory, would say we think the city, and looking at the budget, we think they need to maybe make a goal for, long-range budget process being more, now we have a budget process that people either love or don't love. So maybe this committee would make a goal or make a recommendation, I guess, maybe better, for how the community does, participates in our budget, and then how we do the budget, right? So they could just make that recommendation, and then goals might be, like we talked about last year with our savings fund. I can't remember what we call it, but our, a reserve. Thank you. They might say, hey, looking at X, Y, and Z, we think the reserve actually should be 20%, and we think the city council should save, X, Y, and Z dollars a year to get to that point. Or with our capital spending, instead of it being all bonds, our proposal is that, they adjust spending X, Y, and Z ways, and so the capital spending is 50% bonds and 50% cash. So I think that is my thought. Claire, feel free to chime in if that's not, what you thought. And then there was kind of a conversation already about the pension board and this board. That's not something that I think is, I think it's good that they pay attention to that. I don't need to recreate what the pension board is doing. So I'm happy to, kind of strike that, because I think pension board people are very specific thinkers and should be on the pension board. And so I'm happy to strike 5 if people don't support that one.
And I want to be clear on that. I'm not sure I would recommend striking it. I would recommend designing it really carefully so it interlocks properly with what actually are the pension board's duties. So it's not reaching in and doing the pension board's job, but contextualizing the output of the pension board's work in the larger budget discussion, which is, look, they spit out a number and then we got to pay that number. And that's really important for us to think about. But when it comes to recommend funding of the retirement plans, that specifically seems like the literal thing that the pension board together with state law are supposed to do.
I agree that, may I?
Yes, go ahead.
So I absolutely agree. We should not strike number 5. And I think there is, as we know, our unfunded debt has been ballooning, and that is in large part about how we decide not actuarial numbers necessarily, but what portion we're funding. And so I do think it's a fundamental component of this committee and a really important component, and to be working with the trustees of the Police and Firemen Pension Board.
Right. And over the last, 8-10 years, we have contributed more than the state requirement to our pension funds. And so I think, and that's in consultation with our pension boards who have come in and agreed with us on that decision. So, yeah. Councilmember Newsma.
I want to express my general support Thank you, Daniel. I want to express my general support for this concept and having a committee or at least a subcommittee that has a focused look at our financial situation. I think this list, as it's enumerated in front of us, does a good job looking at expenses. I would also like this committee to look at revenues in its various forms. Make sure we're looking at both sides of the balance sheet there.
I'm sorry, I can't.
Sorry, I was just saying that could be number 8 if people are, we can figure out some language for adding review of revenue.
I think it's partially in number 1 also when we look at performance.
Yeah, but we think we can spell it out as well.
I think it's appropriate to spell it out. Okay. Next, I have Alderman Ravel.
Well, I really appreciate the idea of getting the city council more involved in all of these budgeting and financing discussions and giving us, providing a way for us to have a deeper understanding of these issues so that when it comes to budget time, we're making, better informed decisions about the budget. I guess I would like to just throw out the possibility as an alternative of sort of a hybrid proposal, and that would be to expand the scope of ANPW to have the regular monthly in-depth look at the financing and the budget, month to month and how we're doing for the year. I guess actually sort of maybe items number 1 and 4 for sure on this list. But then set aside a couple of special meetings of the whole city council where we do some of these bigger things like the discussion about the pending and the retirement plans, how we fund our capital plan. I don't think we as a council are very involved even in determining what's in the capital improvements plan. Because I like the idea that people would all have an opportunity to be a member of this committee, but half the council would only get to that point 2 years from now. And I think we could all benefit from having this in-depth discussion about some of these really complex financial issues right now, so that when we come to the next budget discussion, we're all more up to speed. So I throw that out as sort of an alternative proposal.
Sorry, Councilmember Reed. Okay. Councilmember Braithwaite and then Councilmember Kelly.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Alderman Ravel. I mean, I was sitting here kind of going through the same thought process just in terms of the amount of time that we have to make decisions around the budget. And if we're going to involve the community, I think it's a much better opportunity that we're doing it more frequently. I for one, I love the thought process. It's just yet one more meeting, and with our AP&W schedule, and we've now consolidated our AP&W schedule to pass things on a consent, so the velocity is moving a lot quicker. That then gives us that time on a monthly basis to do it without having to create yet another committee meeting and trying to fit it in on another night with all the other work that we have to do plus full-time schedules. So for those that propose this, I think it's a great idea. I would just like to fold it into AP&W where we're looking at all the other moving parts as well. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Councilwoman Kelly?
I think it's, I think we can look at how we stagger it. Maybe it's not the 2 and 2 years, so that council members participate on this at an earlier date and don't have to wait 2 years. I think we can revisit that. But I think it's very important, this committee would include citizen-based board members also, and I think that's very important for this committee, that we have expertise from outside in the community. Also, I think it's really important this committee could also provide, help provide, or ensure that we get monthly financial reports regarding trends, whether we're staying within our projected budget or not, and I think that's really important that we have a tight rein on that. Also, I need a little bit of an understanding. I feel this should be a standing committee, and does it, being a standing committee, preclude having citizen board members?
Yes.
It does. It absolutely does. Does it say that somewhere?
Yes.
Standing committees are only made up of city members of city council.
Okay, and then what
according
is
to the
this?
city council
Thank
rules.
you. And what is, like, what does that mean to be a standing committee versus, I'm sorry if that's a basic question, but, I mean, I would like this to have the same sort of gravitas as a standing committee, but with citizen
Absolutely.
board rep.
So that was the reason why I brought it up earlier with Mayor Biss in, I think it was 5.7, that standing committee is a term of art, at least to me, because the rules define a standing committee as consisting only of council members.
And is that the only defining factor of a standing committee, that it's council members?
And essentially that it only reports to city council, right? So it doesn't have to go through one of the other standing committees like APW, P&D. Like this committee is a standing committee, and so anything that comes, any action taken by this committee goes directly to city council. There was no other stop.
Okay, so would there be anything to preclude this committee from reporting directly to city council? I mean, is there any reason that it couldn't?
No. There are other boards, commissions, and committees made up of, that are hybrid, that do report directly to city council. For example, the newly formed reparations committee is a hybrid committee that will report directly to city council.
And economic development?
Economic development would be another one that we're still drafting the ordinance for. So both of those would report directly to city council, but they are hybrid committees. They're just not standing
Okay,
committees.
so it could function like that?
Yes.
That's what I would recommend.
And Madam Chair, if I can just give a brief history lesson for the committee to consider. In the 80s, the Police Pension Board sued the city because the pension board made certain recommendations about how to fund the pension. The city council said, ignored it. And the court determined that the council doesn't have to accept the recommendations of the pension board, but it does have to follow the pension code when determining how to fund the pensions. So I just wanted to give you that information, because if you're considering this committee to actually make those sort of determinations, you still have to follow state law when doing it. You may disagree with the pension board's recommendation, but as long as you're following state law, you should be fine.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Councilmember Kelly.
So also, we originally looked, there was some, looking at AP&W and modifying AP&W's roles, but we decided to leave that out. So in other words, just to dovetail a little bit with the thoughts about AP&W, I think that probably we would have to examine some of AP&W and modify some of the roles of AP&W.
Do you have an example?
Not right now.
Okay.
Does staff have any examples of how you would have to
Yeah.
modify ANPW if you wanted to fold the budget, the finance committee into the actions of the ANPW? I know because we've moved to the consent agenda, ANPW does move much more quickly.
Yeah.
So my initial thoughts when I heard you guys discuss that it would be a subcommittee of APW or a special committee, because it included citizens or residents, and those actions or recommendations would then just go to the APW agenda for discussion action.
Okay.
The other thought that I had when listening to some of the comments from Councilmember Ravel and Councilmember Braithwaite is that one of the two APW meetings that you had a month would focus specifically on financial issues.
Yeah.
So whichever method you guys choose is obviously what I will make sure is recorded in the rules, but those are the two things that I heard in terms of folding it into APW.
Yeah. All right. Sorry. I don't know who turned them on. Okay, Councilmember Fleming.
Yeah, so having sat on APW, at some point or another, we were getting more regular budget updates, and I don't know, they kind of petered off and they kind of came and went. I don't know what that was about. I guess my concern again is that the budget is really important. It always kind of comes up fast. More and more citizens are asking about participating in them. And while AP&W does move faster with consent agenda, it doesn't always move faster, and it depends on the consent agenda and the comments and all that. Regarding having an APW, I think is what you said, meeting set aside just for budget. I don't know if we could squeeze that into once a month or if that would be quarterly or what have you. But my concern with that is that we started that fifth Monday for homeless or affordable housing. And again, that kind of came and went, was all over the place. Yeah, so, I mean, I would support, and I understand your concern, Councilmember Braithwaite, about the night of the week. I also don't want to add something else. However, again, I think this is very important. I don't love the way we've done the budgeting in the past. And so I just would like a better handle on it. I am currently not on AP&W. I suppose I could adjust my schedule to go that way if the rest of the council feels like this needs to be an AP&W item. But again, having sat at AP&W now, we're talking about starting at 4:30. We don't have a great history of, starting and stopping at the times we say. And so my concern would be the budget would have the potential of not having the discussion it requires because we're trying to kind of beat the clock and either get to the next meeting or stop this other meeting on time. So having this committee report to APW makes sense to me, because then you guys do have more information to chew on if you want to chew on it more at some other time at APW. And then again, as it comes to council, we can all discuss it. But those are my suggestions for this committee.
All right, Councilmember Reed, and then after that I have Councilmember Braithwaite. Yeah, go ahead.
I will say that I am supportive of this committee. I wonder if, because this seems like somewhat of a, there isn't consensus here, if this is something we should take either a vote or a straw poll on to move forward, so we don't have staff prepare something that either, that doesn't have support of the council. This is a pretty big thing, creating a new committee. So I think we should. I think it should have the budget is large enough and important enough that it should have a committee that focuses solely on the budget, and I think we should move in that direction. I think it should be a committee that reports directly to council. I don't think it should be a subcommittee of AP&W or some other formulated another way. I think it should have council members and residents on it. So I am supportive of moving forward with this. Pretty much as presented. I did want to note one thing with the pension board earlier, that I think it makes sense for this committee, again, within the law, to at least monitor what the pension boards are doing and make sure that they're on track and performing well.
So if I can, along those lines,
Yeah.
Madam Chair, this started with a discussion of 9.2 and the amendments made to that section. However, the referral was pursuant to 9.10. So if it is a special committee made up of members of City Council and residents, if I can ask this committee if we can strike the additions in 9.2, which are to add a fifth standing committee,
Right.
and to set meeting dates for the Finance Committee. We can strike those changes at the very least, and you can continue your discussion as far as the
Okay.
Finance Committee is concerned, but it was made as a referral, as a special committee to
Okay.
begin with.
And I understand that. Okay.
Okay.
Let me just hear from, I'm just going to go ahead because I haven't spoken yet. I really like the idea of having a finance committee. I think it is critically important. I also like the idea of folding it into ANPW. I like the fact that I would prefer that it be a standing committee because of its significance. And I am concerned, I'll speak out about the residents serving on that, in terms of, I think that we have many members of the community who are very, very interested in the budget. And I think by appointing just a select few to this committee, that elevates them above some of the other members of the community who might have just as much of an interest in this, and they were not elected to serve on the council. So I think having people certainly participate and be very active in the discussion with the Finance Committee, I think that's very appropriate. But I think that having it remain a standing committee made up of solely city council members is more appropriate. All right, who is next here? Alderman Braithwaite.
Thank you very much, Chairwoman, and I think you captured all my thoughts. I mean, we've talked about this for quite some time. We're all interested in the budget. We all want to know more about the budget. I think maybe less than an hour ago, we just made improvements to our staff memos that are going to continue to give us more information, which are budget updates that we all just talked about in great detail. So I'm supportive of it. all I can do is make the recommendation. We're less than 2 months into this, and I think I've heard a lot of wonderful ideas and a lot of strong focus in some areas, and I would just love to try this in the existing footprint versus creating another committee meeting that now somehow we're going to have to be floating back and forth between the committee that's supposed to keep track of the budget. So that's it.
Okay.
I guess we'll eventually
Thank
have to
you.
vote
All
on
right.
it. Thank you.
Councilmember Kelly.
So I did just take a quick look at the AP&W, and I think, for example, you asked me what might change. I think the liaison with the police and fire pension boards, that would be something that would be removed from AP&W, should we move forward with this committee. And I do think it's extremely important that we form this committee. I think residents are very concerned about taxes, and I think it will be very reassuring to our community to know that we're forming this committee.
Can I guess a point of clarification then to Alderman Fleming. So I just want to make a clear distinction between the function of the committees, because as we all know, and those who sit through the committee, like AP&W passes the bill. So it's like our operational expenses, anything that comes up, like how, in the concept of developing this new committee, and I'll turn to you, I don't want to make it seem like talking you back. Are you then advising AP&W, because in a couple of months we're going into budget season, and so I'm just, in my mind, I don't have a flow chart, so I just want to understand like the basic function when we go into the budget cycle, because we're going to start this whole thing over and over again with a lot of long meetings focused on the budget. So where does this committee fall into play, just so I understand what we're doing here?
Yeah, so this committee is year-round, right? And so it's not just, we're getting ready to pass a new budget, so this committee's launching into action and, going line by line, right? This committee is long-range, because as Councilmember Ravel just said, we don't really, we get the budget, it has the capital improvement plan in there, they tell us how they're going to pay for it, we just say, okay. So I think this committee does more. So, right, if it's gears up now, it's kind of start looking at the budget when everybody else starts looking at the budget. So it's not going to necessarily come, I would imagine, this year with like huge budget recommendations, because it's going to be looking at the budget starting the same day we look at the budget. But it's going to be following the budget. And again, having served on APW for 4 years, I would challenge that we don't really dig into the budget. Yes, we pay the bills, we do those things. We're not really digging into the budget in APW. We are doing the fiscal management, but we're not spending a lot of time in APW, from my experience, talking about the budget itself. Where are we at in the budget? Where are we going? Are we going to be in a deficit? We get those updates from the CFO as a whole council.
And wouldn't the new changes that we made in the memos make adjustments for that in terms of?
No, because it would just talk about, again, going back to the beach, that financial note would be just about the beach. So it would give the impact on, free Evanston access, for the budget for that line item, but not for the overall budget, right? It wouldn't. So how we started this year, or it did last year, I can't remember which one, where we did adjustments, we did budget modifications, right? We had a surplus, we did a modification. This group would have known that was coming. Now, they don't have a crystal glass to necessarily stop things that are happening, but as they get some kind of, as they get some meetings under their belt and are really solely focused on it, it would be similar to, what's the one that does, not P&D, but what is it, ZBA? Like we have all these zoning boards, ZBA, and, right, they spend a lot of work. We appoint the kind of people with experience on those boards, and then they bring those things to us, right? And we always say, well, these are our citizens. We don't always agree with them, but they're the citizens who have the expertise. They spent time on this one issue, and they bring forth their recommendations. And then the memos that we look at say, ZBA, suggests we do this, or they don't. And so this would be the same thing. And I think in terms of having citizens on it, while we only, I think, put in the memo for a couple of citizens, that's because we wanted to not have these meetings that are hard to attain for quorum-wise. But it's, again, same as every other committee. We have lots of people who want to be on all of our committees. The mayor chooses, who he's going to choose. And we tell other people, hey, apply again, right? So it's not like we're saying these two people are somehow or another more special than anyone else. They're just saying they're serving a term on this committee for this time period. So while we have a lot of people who might be interested, the goal would be to have people who have some expertise. And so that's going to slim the field down a little bit more. And those people would serve their time on this committee, and then they would cycle off like everyone does on every other committee. So I don't think it would be exclusionary, Just like I have lots of people in my ward who are still waiting to get on other committees that they've applied for a long time ago. So that's my difference, Peter. I think we could do more in thinking of the budget committee, and thinking of the budget at AP&W, but because we had not done that, because everyone doesn't serve on AP&W, because the budget is massive, and we just kind of take what the city manager gives us when we look at the budget. I just think this gives us a better opportunity to look and hone in, and this group to give advice, which the council could then say yes, no, I don't care, but at least we know that people are looking at it, and we can flag some things that maybe would save us some time once we get to the budget, or even after we pass the budget, if trends are looking up or down or whatever.
So, but Cicely, and I agree. I think we need to study all those issues. There has to be a committee that's studying that year round. Why couldn't it be folded into A&PW and budget? Why couldn't it be folded in?
Why couldn't the budget committee be part of APW?
Yeah.
Because again, I'm just speaking from my last 4 years of the AP&W committee, we don't always have time. We can say we're going to have time, but we don't always have time. Sometimes we have a few things on the consent agenda. Sometimes we have a lot of things. Sometimes we pull off one thing. Sometimes we pull off 10 things. Mm-hmm. I mean, we just don't know. We've spent time, Peter and I, not arguing, but asking staff about purchase of vehicles that maybe somebody would have thought it was going to just be on consent agenda, and we pull it off and we have 20-minute conversations about it. And if that meeting is then bumped up behind P&D, and then we just run the risk of not doing our due diligence based on time and based on agenda.
Right. And I don't mean to throw a grenade into this conversation, but there are many communities that don't have an A&PW committee, and that's been.
Well, if we want to get rid of AP&W and roll that up to council, I'm fine with that, but I still think we need to have a budget committee.
No, that's my point to some extent. So that's why I'm saying I don't want to blow this all up and say, let's eliminate A&PW. No,
because I think someone needs to look at the bills, and this committee is not looking at the bills. They're not looking at purchasing of vehicles. They're not doubling what AP&W does, but I just don't think, again, in my 4 years, that we've made a commitment to really look at the budget outside of the fall time when the budget is presented to us.
So if I may, Councilmember Fleming, the way this is written in the packet seems to take away some of the duties of APW and place it into the Finance Committee. And maybe I'm misreading it, but that's to your point that it's not taking away those things. It says this committee considers matters relating to bills, budgets, financial reporting and management, investments, rating agencies, police and fire, pension boards.
Right. So I think the only thing I would say there is bills, but I don't see this as like looking at the Amazon credit card bill, right? That's not what this committee's doing. But they might say, hey, we want to look quarterly at what is our spending, right? Or they, this committee would have, I think that's in there as something that they would be looking at. But monthly, I don't see them looking at the budget and the spending as we do in AP&W.
Okay.
I mean, that's not my vision for it. Now, this committee might say, hey, credit card spending is high, let's spend some time and let's make some recommendations around that. But those bills might already be approved, right? They're not going to look at them and then say, hey, yes, we approve these spending. We approve it to go to AP&W to be on the agenda. So maybe we should just vote for the matter of time. It can be, I know we have other things we want to get to.
I'm looking at the time and knowing that Human Services is supposed to start at 6, and we are supposed to have an executive session beforehand. So in the interest of continuing to stay relatively prompt, I am going to suggest that we stop where we are right now, and we can, that we need to wrap up this discussion and then adjourn the Rules Committee and hold the rest of the discussion till our July meeting, which we will have, and then move into executive session.
All right, so I just have one objection, and as the Chair of Human Services, I don't want to go long, but
yeah.
4, 5, I'm sorry, R5 and R6 were held from last time. And they happen to be my items, but, they were held from last time. And so if we don't get to them this time, then they're now, moved again. Or actually, 6 was yours, I'm sorry, Clerk Reed, but 5 was mine. But,
okay.
It was just, again, this is my concern with budget going to AP&W. But
and your point well taken, and I will make sure that those 2 items are taken care of at the next Rules Committee meeting.
Well,
I just want to add another objection to the pile. At a minimum, could we please resolve the questions in section 9 before we break halfway through section 9?
Yeah, that's fine. No, my point was that we bring this to a conclusion and we move, but we can't, we're not going to get through this whole agenda.
Right. I'm just saying there's other items in section 9, and I would at least like to resolve that as opposed to breaking in this sort of weird spot.
All right, so where are we on the?
I also just want to raise objections. I think, some of these are straightforward. R3, particularly, I think is pretty straightforward. R2 may require some discussion, but I think, I'd appreciate if we got through R2 and R3.
Well, I think we need to finish what we're doing right now before we move into, and then decide we're going to move into executive session, because otherwise Human Services is just going to go on too long.
There are many people in our community waiting for, based on what we need to discuss in executive session.
So can we vote on R4? I mean, it's on here for discussion. Can we give a straw poll? Can we give direction?
Wait.
So, yes, I was going to ask, Chair, if staff can get direction with respect to R4, because it does impact the editing of R2 at the very
So
least.
R4 is the creation of a finance budget subcommittee or
So the way it's redlined
Special
in the
committee?
document is that it's a standing committee. The way it was proposed and referred is that it would be a subcommittee.
Right, subcommittee because we wanted citizens on it.
Right. So
So it has to be either a special committee or a subcommittee.
correct.
And if it's a subcommittee, it's a subcommittee of what?
That's up to you guys to
I think
decide.
it's a special committee because
So
it's not a
let's make it a
subcommittee.
special
Council.
committee.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and there was some discussion that you guys wanted it to report directly to council, so it probably should be a special committee. And if that's the case, then that's fine. And there's also a red line in here for 9.7, which actually defines the finance special committee. We can move that, but I just want to make sure if you guys vote to make that happen, that I know where to put it in the rules. That's all.
Okay. All right.
All right, so now we're saying it's a finance
So why don't we
special
just-
committee reporting to city council.
Yes.
Meeting
So-
monthly. If people are, again, I'm not trying to use anyone's time. If people don't, if we want to have it as a committee that just is made up of whatever council members are interested and citizens, that's fine. We don't have to do the rotation. If people feel like, they don't want to do that because of their time constraints, I totally get that. I don't need to force anyone to give up another night of their life.
I like the rotation aspect of it. I don't know how.
And we do have it in there, Councilmember Braithwaite, that, if someone can't rotate in, we understand people have other
Yeah.
obligations and, you don't have to.
Either way this goes, again, we're all interested in the budget. There's not a question that it's just, how do we be the most efficient with our time? And I just hope that the two don't come in conflict where I'm like, now I got to go back and watch a meeting to understand what we're doing here at AP&W. And so.
Well, this would have to meet on another night other than.
Clearly.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And make sure there's no redundancy in the information that we're receiving. Like, I don't have to look in two places to get what I need or what we need to make operational decisions.
I think someone should move, or I'd
Well, I
like
just
to
did.
move R4.
Do I need to make a
So-
motion? Or did you just do that?
Some comments.
I am sorry. I apologize, Councilmember Burns. Go right ahead.
So the staggered is a little concerning because this is a committee that I would want to just be on. It's really important that for my ward, I have a vote on some of these recommendations that start on this committee and make their way to council. So I kind of like how we do it already, where whoever is interested, maybe we set a certain amount, but if you're interested, you can sit on the committee. If you're not, you're not. And I know you just mentioned that, but I would personally like that because this is a committee that I would want to be on year round, because some of the questions that I had some months ago, and I had one-on-one conversations with Councilmember Braithwaite about this, is that and let me know if this committee would do this work or if it would be AP and W, but is like I think it's at the point where we need to do some zero-based budgeting and really work our way through each department, similar to what CDBG is doing now in their restructuring, where they're looking at funding programs that have quantifiable services with measurable outcomes. And I think that is a standard that we should apply to every single department and every bit of taxpayer money that we spend. I'm not sure AP&W has the time to really go through every department line by line and do that work. And so if it does, great, but I saw this committee as potentially a committee that could do that work. In addition, interested in exploring creating an actual reserve fund as opposed to having a reserve fund balance, which is just a general fund balance. Again, I saw this committee as a committee that could potentially explore that work. So if it is, I think that would be the place to have this happen. I think we need to really go line by line through each department because we have, obviously unfunded pension responsibilities, debt service obligations, and we just can't, the community, my ward, folks in my ward, not everyone, but just can't afford any more property tax increases, especially if we don't absolutely need them. And so continuing to balance our budget by raising property taxes and not having a mechanism to explore more creative ways to bring in revenue is a problem for me. And so I would love for this committee to kind of lead on that work. So I just wanted to add those. And I think having the community members be able to participate is really important for me because we see so many things, obviously from Jamie, but also others that the staff is not required to react to. And I need that reaction, right? Like if we have somebody that presents, a 2-3 page response to a budget item, to our budget, and there's no reaction, formal reaction from our staff, that's a concern for me. Like I want to find a space where community members who have an expertise, who are thought leaders in this space can kind of work with us and our staff to kind of get to the bottom of this stuff. And we saw that especially in the situation with expanding access to the lakefront, to our beaches. So however we can formalize that's really what to Councilmember Braithwaite's point about what's the problem. That's the problem. I need staff to be reacting to our community members who are providing some really good insight on our budget. And I think that's it.
Okay.
That's it.
All right, thank you. So I think those are all excellent points. So at this point, I really do want to keep us moving along. At this point, I'm looking at 9.2, where we have the Finance Committee listed as a standing committee. So we need to strike that, correct?
Yes.
So
Yes.
let's all agree to strike that because this is, if it's a special committee, it's not a standing committee. So let's strike that. And then we need to strike the Finance Committee shall meet at XYZ time. So we have to create the Finance Committee. This comes later, I believe, in the rules. So those two things need to be removed. Then moving on to 9.3, the rules. I believe that subsection A here, because it relates back to that earlier, is gone. So subsection small a is stricken.
Because of 5.8, is that right?
Yes.
Gotcha.
Okay. So then moving.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
In the big A.
Yes.
It still refers to the Transportation Committee, which we've disbanded.
Has
so
disbanded. So
we
that,
need to-
thank you. Thank you,
As
Councilmember
well as the
Ravel.
Housing and Community Development Act Committee, because that's been, I think, more
Condensed.
into like.
It's
two-
in the process.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so I wouldn't change it yet? All right.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Thank you, Eagle Eye Ravel there. So then moving forward, I next see 9.5, which is changing the membership of Human Services Committee from 6 to 5. All right. No objection to that. That's what we've done. All right. Now moving to P&D is now 7 members. Well, it has been. All right. So then 9.7 is,
So this was the area suggested for adding the Finance Committee,
Finance
but it's not going to be a standing committee, so we can move it under 9.10.
so,
And
all right.
define
So
it
then
there.
okay, standing committees, priorities, procedures? No.
Under special committees. It's been renumbered, but
Okay.
the next page, page 106
okay.
of your packet.
I see. Special committees?
Yes. So I'll add Finance Committee and assignments under special committees. defining it as a special committee.
Yes.
I will utilize the memo provided by Councilmember Fleming to define it and its assignments. And then that's something that you guys can either vote up or down in July.
Okay. Mayor Biss.
I believe there's an understandable confusion about the request. My understanding of the request was the Finance Committee and assignments are two different entities. And it's what I think, and I'm sort of intuiting what must have been an email exchange between you and Councilmember Suffredin, but what I think is being referred to as assignments is what I've talked to some colleagues as what you might call a referrals committee or a references committee. And the idea here is to deal with the flow of referrals so that every council member's referrals are directed to the proper committee in a timely fashion, in a way that's consistent with staff capacity, in a manner that's totally transparent. And the idea here would be, in fact, to create a standing committee whose sole responsibility is to assign referrals out to committees to ensure that we have a completely transparent way of overseeing the workflow and making sure that everything gets a fair hearing in a timely fashion. And I know it's late, we want to break. I'm happy, I've worked on a draft. I'm happy for us to just simply agree to work on that, and as long as we're ready to vote on it in the July meeting, because I think this is an important tool that we could use to significantly professionalize and improve the workflow of the council.
Okay. I have Alderman Revelle, Councilmember Revelle, and then Councilmember Reed, and then Councilmember Burns.
I had my thing about the Transportation Committee.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
upset.
All right. Thank you. So, Councilmember Reed?
Yes, I like the idea of the referral committee or committee on references. I forget what the title is. But I do think it creates a step that it may be unnecessary. As the code currently stands, referrals should be sent to the city clerk, and then the city clerk would maintain presumably a record of all the referrals and then send those to the committee chairs. And I think it's really up to the committee chair to set their agenda and to determine, given that we're going to have determine how long the meeting is going to be, determine how many things are going to be on the agenda, and then move from there. I don't know what a committee on referrals would necessarily solve that shouldn't just be done through the regular staff process.
Mayor Biss, would you like to address that before I call in Councilmember Burns?
Sure. Just very quickly, I think that what we've encountered just in this last month, I've heard from a lot of different council members, some who feel that their initiatives are being undermined by staff, some who feel that their initiatives aren't getting a quick enough hearing, others who feel like they're not getting a chance to get a word in edgewise. There's just been a lot of anxiety about what is the workflow, who's deciding, what is the staff capacity, who's deciding that, what is the interaction between all these different constraints that allows us to have things moving forward in a way that everyone can agree on what happened, there's transparency around what happened and why, and that there's no possibility for either hard feelings or confusion. And I think doing that in a way that is completely transparent is really valuable. And I think as soon as you lack that transparency, you open up the possibility of hard feelings or frustration. And I think that those hard feelings and that frustration really could get in the way of our work. And that's what I would like to avoid.
And I wonder if the transparency wouldn't just be that you make a reference and we have an expectation that staff is able to respond to that within a timely manner, and we set a time frame that 14 days, 30 days, whatever that your reference, whatever referral you make gets on an agenda, as opposed to setting up a committee where we have to come and I don't know what the committee would. What does this committee do? They vote to assign issues to various committees. We just do that through the regular referral process.
I think that a universal rule that every referral must be heard by a date certain is, it's mathematically unfollowable in some circumstances, and to set that as the ironclad law just sets us up for trouble. And it is that specific problem that a committee like this would exist to avoid.
By
when we encounter that situation, the situation of, man, there simply is not a possibility of hearing every referral within 14 days, then instead of some opaque thing.
Just a point of privilege, and I want to be so respectful of folks. We have an executive session meeting that's important. We've had only a handful of council meetings to where we can continue to work this out. I would just respectfully ask also, because we have a human services agenda, if we can pause where we are and go into executive session so we can get the updates that we've all been waiting to hear based on the conversation this weekend.
Can we just finish this? I mean, and
Let's
again,
get through this.
I'm happy to not R5. I think it's important. I would hope it'd be the first thing on the agenda for the next meeting, but I'm happy to not push for that to be done. But if we could just finish this piece, and maybe we can hear from Mr. Burns since he had his light on, and
Yes. I do think, I mean, this.
so then we don't stop this discussion. This item just gets finished, and then we finish after this item.
So I do think, and I recognize, Mayor Biss, that this is very important, and the value of this. I do think this needs a little more discussion. Councilmember Burns.
This is in some ways a parallel discussion. I think we need to have a discussion about city clerk responsibilities, because I do think this is something that the clerk could do. And if not, if we do create the committee, I think the clerk should participate in that committee. But, as a former interim deputy clerk, there was a lot of kind of work and responsibility that we tried to achieve, and the office is not what it was even when we came in. It had many responsibilities that it doesn't have now. And so I think this is, because it's already in the code that the clerk kind of handle referrals, I think we just need to have a discussion about like the work that we want our city clerk to do. And I think this is a responsibility the clerk can handle without having maybe to add another layer of committees. Maybe not. But separate from this, I think we need to have a conversation about city clerk responsibilities. Yeah.
Okay, that will be another agenda item. I think we need to end this meeting, and I want to make sure I'm respectful of everyone's issues. I like the idea of an assignment committee. I think it maybe needs a little bit more explanation to other members of the Rules Committee. Can we put that on the July meeting?
Madam Chair,
or can we move forward with it?
I would ask if, you said you have a draft of what this would look like.
Yes.
If you could provide it, and then I will just put it in this document for you guys in July.
Yes, let's do that.
Can I do that?
That would not be my preference, but
Okay.
if that's the wish of the committee, then that's.
Well, I think that.
I mean, could we just do a
Finish this
straw poll, and if people are
Let's
interested
do-
in it as it sends, then it goes, and we're not voting on it
Okay.
now?
Let's do a straw poll as are we, Mayor Biss, what would you call this, the assignment?
That's
committee?
fine, yeah.
Okay,
And-
all right. So let's do a straw poll. That it goes on, yes, it goes on the July agenda of the Rules Committee. No, it does not.
Oh, I wasn't thinking
Wait,
that. I'm
is that
sorry.
what you're
No, I was thinking a straw poll, like, yes, I support this committee creation. And then if that passes, and then it goes to
Right.
Council Cummings,
Yeah.
and then he brings it back in July, and we can vote
Right.
for
Okay,
approval
that's-
of it.
that's what-
That
that's
also
what I
gives
thought
us
you
time
said.
to see the draft the mayor has and make our edits.
Right, well, that's what I thought I was saying. So
okay.
you're supportive? No, you're not. Am I not clear? I'm sorry. Okay. Ms. Franchella, would you call the roll?
There's not a motion.
It's just a straw
Okay,
poll. We're
okay.
just.
All right.
It's a
That's
straw
fine.
poll.
All right.
Okay, so, all right, raise your hand if you are supportive of this committee. Okay? Okay, I think, Nick, can you tell?
Yeah, we have
All right,
it's
okay, we're
definitely a
okay.
majority.
All right, thank you all. All right, so, thank you. So, at this point, we're going to,
I would like to see R2, R3 on the agenda for action for the next meeting.
Yes.
Instead
Those-
of discussion, because we've held them for quite a while, and they're not huge. I mean, I think we can place them for action for the next meeting.
Councilmember Reed, I think because that we haven't decided what to do with them, so I would say we should keep them on for discussion, at this point, before we determine, because that's why we have things, I mean, you can see.
I know, but I do think to his point, because the same with R5, right? I mean, these now have been, and we're not finished with the rules, so we got to pick up the rules at the next meeting, so we're starting at whatever. And then if we have them for discussion, then if we don't meet in August, right? I mean, I just think,
Okay.
for the sake of respect.
Let's put them
we
on
should-
for
Can I-
action, and then if we need to, yes.
So R2 and R3 were not incorporated in the document that was presented in R1.
Right.
If I can just incorporate them and we take them up all at the same time, is that?
No, we want to have,
I think
I want
that's
them to be
appropriate.
separated out.
Okay.
So R2 remains separate, R3 remains separate,
May I ask the chair
R5 and
why?
R6, they all remain separate.
You want them all for action?
Yes, let's make them all for action. Okay. So get a good night's sleep, everyone, before that meeting. Okay, so seeing no further business tonight.
We should have a motion to
Excuse me,
adjourn because there is
Wait,
business.
just a moment, just a moment.
I'm sorry, that's the quick one.
The marvelous Ms. Francello has done the recalculation. And so it turns out that for Human Services Chair for May 2022 to September 2022 should be Councilmember Ravel. Correct?
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank
So
you for your hard work.
I move that Councilmember Ravel be inserted in that slot. Is there a second? Second. All those in favor?
We need a roll call.
Oh, please roll call.
Okay, here we go. Councilmember Kelly?
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite?
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen? Councilmember Nguyen?
Aye.
Councilmember Nusma?
Aye.
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Sufferton?
Aye.
Councilmember Ravel?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming?
Aye.
Mayor Biss?
Aye.
All right, that concludes item R1. So now, seeing no further action,
Wait,
we are,
We're going into executive session.
yes, we are going to go into the executive session, and can I read it? Okay. Councilmember Newsman, would you read the motion?
I'll move that pursuant to 5 Illinois compiled statutes, ILCS 120/2A, I move the Rules Committee convene into executive session to discuss agenda items regarding personnel. This agenda item is permitted subject to be considered in executive session and is an enumerated exception under the Open Meetings Act. These exceptions are 5 ILCS 120/2A and C1. It's set forth as follows. Discussion of personnel matters.
Roll call, yes.
Councilmember Kelly?
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite? Aye. Councilmember Nusma?
Aye.
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Sufferton?
Aye.
Councilmember Ravel?
Aye.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Nguyen?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
No.
Councilmember Fleming?
Aye.
Mayor Biss?
Aye.
We are now in executive session. Thank you all.